Hello and welcome to the show. Now, the Gurkha proved to be surprisingly entertaining when we took it racing. However, there was another purpose I had in mind for this car, and that is for some obstacle course racing. This is kind of along the lines of autocross. However, it's constantly evolving as the players are driving the Gurkhas or the Hummers, if they don't have the DLC, to move them around and create chicanes and roadblocks around the course of a lap, while we went racing with, or four of us went racing with some sort of normal B-class cars. The first event, we went to Long Beach. Now, this proved to be very good fun for obstacle course racing on Forza 5, so we hope that would carry on in 2.6, especially when we have a lot more Gurkhas making roadblocks. So you kind of get the idea immediately. The rules for the Gurkhas is that they must leave at least a car's width so that we can get the vehicles through. They cannot simply just block the road up, what would be the point? They have to leave a car's width. On this first race, I was having huge frame rate issues. I don't know why. My game was doing about 20 frames a second. It was awful. I don't know. It's only for this event have I ever had that problem. It went slightly bizarre. Or for this single race it did that. So yeah, I was struggling a bit into turn one. Unfortunately, it didn't get fixed through the entire thing, but I couldn't really do much. With the Gurkhas positioning themselves cleverly, the Impreza, what you would think would be a normal racing line, the poor Subaru, just couldn't quite get turned in time. And of course, us drivers, we have no map, no name over cars, and no distance indicator on, so we never quite know what's going to be around a corner. So an element of caution is very, very important, as the Celica finds out running into the side of the Gurkha there, and that allowed me to catch up, the Subaru to catch up as well. This was a big battle all over second place. Unfortunately, the Celica in that crash had taken a fair bit of engine damage, which would mean he would need to take a trip through the pits. It's kind of a lot of a risk versus reward thing. You attack a corner too fast, you don't quite know what's going to be around it, you'll end up in trouble. You see me being quite careful through that turn on the inside to get past the Gurkha. I'm now too wide with the Impreza through the next corner, and being so walled in and so on, you just simply cannot see what's going on ahead of you as you come around the final corner, get surprised by a Hummer that the poor Impreza was struggling with understeer, did not have the turning circle of my my little Lotus. That's actually the first time I'd used the Elise in Forza 6, and it was doing pretty well for a B-class handling car. Certainly, it was doing pretty well. The Duke, surprisingly, was leading the way, and I spent a lap or two trying to chase him down. With a lot of these roadblocks, we often had, or these obstacles, I should say, wasn't really roadblocks. We had multiple ways of going. I tried diving up the inside of that one there. It didn't really work. That Hummer really messed up the Duke. It was a slightly strange place to have a car. It really confused the Nissan. So all the advantage he'd gained through the previous corner had been completely lost at that turn. And it's certainly easier being the car that's following. On the most part, the Duke's on the most part, it's easy being the car that's following. If the Duke outbrakes himself, I outbrake myself as well, because I was kind of gauging on what he was doing through that section. Despite a bit of a bump, a bit of a collision, we took a bit of aero damage, a bit of suspension damage on my car, and brake damage was the bigger issue. The engines in our vehicles were absolutely okay. It wasn't that bigger a shunt getting through there. So yeah, the Duke was fine. Again, nasty positioning of vehicles through that final corner, because you simply can't see them. And now the Duke is following the Lotus, so he can see how much speed I can take through there and see how my car fits, and can follow that line and be a little bit braver, carry that bit more speed, which now puts him at the advantage as we come down towards turn one. That is a nasty place to have a car as well. It can really catch you out if you're not careful. And the Duke, as you might imagine, in B class has a fair bit more straight line speed than the Lotus. My real concern, you see my car spearing off to the right there with my dodgy braking. Yeah, I really thought I was going to smack the Nissan off the road there with my quite poorly brakes. I had to take to the inside of the first corner. The Duke tried to take to the inside of the roundabout and learned an important lesson that some cars don't really like going over the roundabout. Admittedly, the replay a little bit laggy, but yeah, it is not a good idea to try and cut across the the roundabout as the Nissan got stuck. A great little battle for the lead was over relatively quickly, with the Nissan stuck, spinning his wheels. The Subaru does a very similar thing, but the Subaru, being a four-wheel drive rally car, managed to get himself off fine, while the Duke, I don't know what on earth went on, it just got completely and utterly wedged. In the end, the Gurkhas have to come and help him. There's no problem for them driving across the roundabout. That sorts out the Duke gets him going again. Yeah, important lessons are learned. Don't cut across the roundabout there in a vehicle you are unsure about. And as the race progressed, the obstacles got smarter and smarter, or more awkward depending on which way you looked at it, as the Impreza found out, making us take interesting and weird lines in places we don't normally go. And the Subaru wasn't quite having the turning circle for dealing with it. Admittedly, you don't normally end up going out there. It's part of the track that you don't visit unless things have gone really badly wrong. That's what I love about obstacle racing. It throws up all sorts of different challenges. Unfortunately, a lot of these cars suffered quite heavy damage, and again we see the Subaru struggling to turn. The Duke would have another crash and have to take to the pits. We already saw the Toyota in, and the Subaru decided to dive in and fix his car up as well. Mine was unhealthy, but not undrivable, so I persevered. The damaged brake was perhaps the biggest concern. You can see how narrow some of these gates were getting. The Elise could get through them, and the Elise was a good car, as you would imagine. Very small, very light. The fear, or perhaps the slight fear I had with this, is it would get damaged very, very easily, being such a tiny car. When we were up against Gurkhas, if I had a big accident, I was going to be in a lot of trouble, whereas the likes of the Dukes perhaps could take a little bit more damage and so on, but I managed to avoid getting into too many accidents basically with the Lotus. The only one that I had was, you saw, where I hit the back of the Nissan. The rest of it though, I made it through with the Lotus, although at the very end I did think there was a gap in between these two Gurkhas. There wasn't. I thought I could fit through the middle. Turns out I couldn't. Had to go in reverse slightly and a little bit across the curves to get past, but I found a way as we come out towards the final corner. Yeah, got to be really wary around the final corner because you're never quite sure if there's going to be a car on the other side of it to get stuck behind. But yeah, the Lotus, as you would imagine, the Elise, great for this kind of thing. Really good at being nimble and dodging through the gates when things go a little bit wrong. The Impreza was to be in second. You briefly saw the Toyota in the background after his pit stop. You see in the background the Toyota outbraked himself and slid into a Hummer. The Toyota after his pit stop would brake his car again and was pretty damaged while he was sat in third. The Impreza gives it a wide berth around the final corner, but there was no need, as there was no cars or none of the obstacle vehicles around that area. So yeah, Impreza would come in second ahead of the Toyota, while the Nissan would end up in fourth. Yeah, being stuck on a roundabout and then having to take a trip through the pit lane, did not help with the Duke. Race 2, we went to Rio, and one of the Gurkhas was being a pain on the start line, screwing over the Civic and the Evo. Unfortunately, replay cameras around Rio do not work for this kind of event. I was hoping that the cameras would kind of follow the cars. They have sort of their predetermined routes, and when you brake to go through chicanes that shouldn't be there, it causes them a little bit of an issue. So yeah, we'll have to use some of the chase cams and so on for this one. This group of cars, after they had made it through the first section, it was a Williams Clio that led over a very noisy rotary car. Don't ask how the Gurkha ended up on its roof. It's a FailRace video. Something had to end up on its roof at some point, and there we go. I'm still not quite sure how that's... That one, a little bit of lag involved, I think, in that one. Around here, the parts of this Rio circuit are very, very narrow. Mitsubishi locked everything up, trying to get that one stopped, when he sort of that panic realization that, oh crap, we've messed up. The Williams Clio was starting to run away with it. The Civic had a really good run on the more modern Clio. However, there's just not enough space. You can't fit two cars into part of these things, and the Civic just had to back it off. He had to let the Clio go because he just simply is going to run out of road to fit the car. That's one of the other difficulties of this. Actually trying to overtake somebody, if they don't make a mistake, trying to get past a car can be quite difficult. It was the Civic though that would have the first of the very big accidents. Rio was trying to close in on the Clio, it just took too much speed. Thought he could get away with speed that he couldn't between two of the Gurkhas, and that's that Civic very very well and truly dead, and a trip to the pit lane to get that vehicle fixed up. It was the two Clios leading the way, with the Williams at the front. Always nice to see a Williams Clio leading the way. The one we're following may have bumped the Gurkha slightly. One other problem that you did have is if the car ahead of you crashed, often it could knock the vehicles around, so that the gap that you're supposed to be going through, that section, the Williams Clio didn't go through, and then he closed off, so the car behind had to just sit and wait while the Williams got himself sorted out. Maybe that was a very very narrow little gap for the for the Renaults to get through, but they did. And the thing is, that was also a very narrow gap to be travelling at speed. The thing is, with these chicanes, the tighter they got, the almost less difficult they got, because you had to slow down for them because they were so ridiculous narrow. So it didn't matter if you scraped the Gurkhas or the Hummers. It didn't matter if you brushed your car past them, because you're never going to do any damage to them, because you're going at sort of 5 miles an hour. The Williams Clio vanishing up the road a little bit, which is a little bit braver through some of these sections. Again, we see it is kind of an advantage being the car follower. You can see what the car ahead does. Follow his line, and if he gets in, or if he's clean through the section, just follow his line. You know where there is a gap that you can fit through. As one of the other rules for this kind of thing, the vehicles, the Hummers and the Gurkhas, are not supposed to move while the cars are in sight. Occasionally, odd little accidents did occur when they didn't realise a car was appearing, such as this one here. Although that could have been a little bit of lag of the car shuffle, or the Gurkha shuffling there, ever so slightly. Yeah, there's a few times people didn't quite realise that the races were approaching while they were reshaping their chicanes and whatnot. That one there, the Clio got caught out. He thought there was a space somewhere where there wasn't. Had to back it up and turn it round to find another route, which allowed the modern Clio to take the lead. These two, having both had to go to the pits early on, would come out and continue their race for third, and both get things wrong into the first of the chicanes. One thing that we did see a few cars doing is when they realised things were going wrong, just lock everything up and kind of throw the car sideways. Better to hit the Gurkhas with the side of your car. Sure, you'll break suspension and aero parts, but you're less likely to damage the engine. So yeah, that is something that we did see a few vehicles doing. While the Civic initially got past the Evo in that little one, the Mitsubishi would get him back, and then again we're going through these very tight chicanes. This one here, for example, if you'd gone the other side of that first Gurkha, you could have made up an awful lot of time. But you sometimes go for the obvious gap, which is not necessarily the most helpful. The blue Clio, he would suffer a mistake, drop back to second, and then a big mistake. Just the opening section. I don't know whether he just simply forgot where the vehicles were. Carried a lot of speed through there, or just simply didn't expect us to be remaining at that part and causing problems. Yeah, carried far too much speed through there, wasn't going to stop. Amazingly, despite hitting that one head on, that's a decent speed. You can see the car wobbling with broken suspension. Didn't take any engine damage, which was quite a surprise. Yeah, the Williams Clio was very fast around here. Admittedly, both the Evo and the Civic that he was coming up to lap here did have to go to the pits. The gaps did get quite narrow towards the end. People got meaner and meaner with the chicanes. But as I said, those were not particularly challenging ones, in that you were just going to be taking very little speed through them. One other thing that we did see sometimes, this is something we saw from Forza 5 as well, as the Evo is not stopping at all in there, is that if one car goes in a little bit too hot, knocks the vehicle, it can actually close the gap up a lot more. So that corner there was never supposed to be that narrow. However, the Civic ploughing in a bit too hot made the gap a lot narrower. That is something that could be a little bit problematic, but it was the Williams Clio that would go on and take the victory. Again, similar thing here. I think the Civic may have knocked the black Gurkha there and completely shunted the gap, so it was very tough to get the cars through. But yeah, the Williams Clio would take victory. I love how the driver tasks just don't care about the Gurkhas being in the way. Yep, there we go. We shall get revenge on the Gurkha and flip it on to its side. A little bit more spread out. This one, certainly. But still, yeah, some nasty chicanes for the cars to negotiate. Our final race, we went to Lime Rock, and these guys decided that they were going to do sort of the staggered start rather than move up to the line like the rest of us. But never mind. The Datsun flew off the line, would get to the lead early on. Maserati did not have a particularly good start. And, well, these guys got it quite easy for the first few corners. Nobody wanted to make a roadblock around here. I don't know why nobody particularly fancied making a roadblock or making some obstacles around that first corner. Admittedly, it does to an extent, if you haven't seen a Gurkha for a while, lull you into a false sense of security and you start taking a little bit more speed through some of the corners. But yeah, nobody had positioned their roadblocks around that part. Everybody had gone to block up one of the further chicanes. We were racing the alternate layout. They were hoping to confuse us, have the racers completely stumped as to where to go. and it didn't work. Because of the way that the track works to take the alternate layout, they thought they were really confused us by blocking off the proper route. But the lead car knew where to go, take the normal circuit almost, and everyone else just followed him. That great plan didn't quite work, and then of course they've got past a large number of the Gurkhas already on this lap, so there's less obstacles for them to worry about. Still didn't quite work out how they planned though, as a chicane on the run down the hill would catch out the NSX. He carried far too much speed in, and the Mitsubishi also would take a little bit too much speed. I think it was my Gurkha that got turned sideways. Again there, the Honda hit my car so that it closed up the gap that was there. The Datsun went through perfectly fine, but yeah, the NSX giving the bump there meant all the cars ended up having to take to the grass. It was a good old-fashioned race into turn one with no Gurkhas in sight, although that didn't stop the Maserati running in a little bit too deep with the brakes locked up and the Honda getting the position back. I imagine the Honda's probably got some handling damage after that. It's a relatively heavy speed that he hit the side of the I think it was my Gurkha. I can't remember which one was. I was somewhere around that section, and again these guys had a nice, relatively calm sort of opening half a lap as they were going side by side down towards the chicane. This time they abandoned the idea, as it clearly wasn't working. Now it was just a slow, tight, nasty chicane that the Maserati gets stuck in. Everybody gets everybody kind of gets checked up and gets stuck. The Maserati gets out the other side the easiest. It was I'm not sure there's a bit of a nudge there, or that was very, very close for the NSX getting through the next chicane. You could afford to get a little bit creative with some of these roadblocks, as we had lots of cars available to us. There was 20, I think perhaps slightly less than 20. I think a couple of people may have disconnected by this one, but you know, we saw 18, 20 Gurkhas to spread around the track. It means you could make some quite big roadblocks. Same roadblock, caught out the NSX big time. Yet again, the Mitsubishi managed to find a way and somehow fit his vehicle through the middle of that group. Again, we were making a nasty chicane at the final corner. Going to the grass was an option, but in all honesty, most of the time it wasn't a particularly good one. You could stay on the track, you could carry that little bit more speed. The Datsun was at the front and leading, and had managed to do a pretty damn good job actually of staying out of trouble, while the other three had been pretty close together and squabbling over position. However, that wasn't to last. I just forgot to, well, really pay a huge amount of attention to the vehicles ahead, braked far too late, and then instantly closed the gap that was there with a fairly hefty hit. The cars are trying to do their best to shuffle out of the way. Gurkha's actually quite hard to manoeuvre around with their terrible launch. You can often get stuck stalling them. I had real problems being parked on that hill with stalling my vehicle. Yeah, that was a pretty big shunt, and the Datsun took a fair amount of damage, and he would have to come to the pit lane. As I said, the Gurkhas were coming up with some interesting ways of making obstacles. The Maserati would take a hefty whack too and fall back through the order. This particular one making us go all the way, or making the races go all the way around on the grass, and the NSX got stuck by the tyre bundle. There is a gap there. The NSX just didn't quite get turned enough. And the thing is, the Mitsubishi has got nowhere to go. There's no space for the Mitsubishi to go to. The Honda really did not like that one. Thing is, especially if you're racing cockpit view or bonnet view, you couldn't really see very well coming over the crest of the hill. And yeah, Honda was trying to carry that little bit too much speed. I was amazed that thing was still going. I don't know how on earth he kept that thing alive. Must have had an awful lot of front brake damage and suspension damage and so on. The Datsun, as I said, had to tour the pit lane after his fairly hefty shunt, which would drop him back to second place, but he was right back into the mix, especially having a fixed car, while these guys had probably got a fair bit of damage. Now, there is a lagged out Gurkha on the background here, so ignore the black car. Going side by side, you wouldn't normally want to be on the outside into this chicane, but with a Gurkha positioned quite awkwardly, the Datsun can pretty much hold the line. The Mitsubishi has to yield. You don't have a choice in that one. It's either go into the Gurkha and lose a lot of time, or just yield and go behind the car and only lose a little bit of time. And yeah, the yielding is a much better option. By the looks of it, the Mitsubishi outbraked himself a little bit. There was a bit of an interesting chicane going on through that next corner. We continued to make a mess of this downhill section. Lots of Gurkhas this time round, and it was the Mitsubishi and Honda yet again going a little bit too deep, and there's a bit of a three-point turn going on there, and yeah, the Mitsubishi's buggered that one up as well. So the Datsun would get a pretty clean break from the rest of them as well. We were trying to force the cars to go on the curb on the outside of that final turn. I was really hoping we could get someone to run too fast over there and spin the car, as the curb is really nasty out that way. We couldn't do it. We tried. We couldn't quite get them to do it. On the final lap, the pack wanted cars to go through the pit lane. The Datsun decided to make up his own gaps and find the place. He wasn't supposed to be going that way. They were trying to force them to go into the pits, and it didn't work because the Datsun found a different gap to get through. Yeah, that one there, it didn't quite work out for the obstacles. Yeah, the obstacle course racing is always good fun. Lime Rock actually worked pretty well. Normally the street circuits work the best where you're walled in. Lime Rock actually a pretty good circuit. Unfortunately, yeah, the replay cameras really weren't particularly good for a couple of these tracks. Yeah, it was good fun. One thing definitely I think I would alter if we do this again. Certainly having the big groups of cars making really complex chicanes doesn't really work for this kind of thing. Yes, I mean, it slows the cars down a massive amount. It can be quite awkward to get them through, but because you slow down so much, it's irrelevant if you scrape the side of a car, if you scrape the side of the Gurkhas and so on, because you're never going to do any damage to you. So it's better to spread them out over the course of the lap rather than have them all kind of cluster up inside of make sort of 2 or 3 big chicanes. Much better to make a few more much faster chicanes. Make it a little bit more of a challenge, certainly, for us racers. But yeah, it was certainly good fun, and I highly recommend you give this kind of thing a go. It's just something a little bit different to try and race around. But that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.